Hi, and welcome to the Wednesday Word. Well, it's been a long 6 months or more since we heard of something called the coronavirus. Back in January and February, we saw this happening in other countries and may have thought how awful it was. I'm sure it won't come here. And then all of a sudden, it was here. And it still is here and looks like it might be here for a while. As I watch the news every day and look for a ray of hope in this crisis, I'm beginning to realize that for now, we have to find a way to live with COVID-19. We look for a vaccine on the horizon, so that is hopeful. But when we hear next year, we think, wow, that's a long time. So what do we do? Well, we continue the precautions, wear a mask, practice social distancing, and wash our hands a lot. But then what? Life is not going to get back to our so-called normal anytime soon. Do we risk going out to eat? How about a vacation? How do we do that? Gathering with our families when the weather gets cold, how is that going to work? Now, these are my concerns as a semi-retired person, but what about the younger people who have to go out to work every day? Or what about those that are unemployed? And what about decisions about opening schools? How do we protect the kids and staff? And how do people work if they count on their children to be in school? These are more urgent questions. How do we do all this? There is no how-to book for this. There is no video or self-help class to walk us through this. This is all new territory. And where in the world do we find wipes? I went back to look at the first Wednesday Word I recorded back in March. I began the Wednesday Word to stay in touch with the congregation at First Church because we could not live stream services. This was the beginning of the pandemic as things were shutting down. I was pretty much telling people to just sit tight for now. I used the scripture from Jeremiah 29 about the people in exile. Of course, now they were exiled for 70 years. We are not going there. Well, we have stepped out a bit since then, but it's still a bit scary. How do we navigate this now? How do we do this? The words, bloom where you are planted, keep coming to my mind. Now, I would love to give you a scripture reference, but there isn't one, even though it sounds familiar. The sentiment can be found in scripture, not the exact words. We have to give the credit to St. Francis de Sales. When he was the Bishop of Geneva, he said, "Truly, charity has no limit, for the love of God has been poured into our hearts by his Spirit dwelling in each one of us, calling us to a life of devotion and inviting us to bloom in the garden where he has planted." So, you get the idea. When the Israelites were exiled to Babylon, they were in less than wonderful situation. But God told them, in a way, to bloom when they were planted for that time. When the Apostle Paul said we should learn to be content no matter what our circumstances, he was kind of saying, bloom where you are planted. In writing to the Corinthian Christians, Paul said, nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. Blooming where you are planted doesn't mean you can't improve yourself or must stay stuck in an awful place. Like a flower that grows through a crack in the concrete, sometimes we have to make the best of our situations and bloom where we have been planted. It seems to be more of a matter of acceptance of the situation, at least for the time being. So I'm thinking, why not choose to be happy now? Otherwise we're going to waste a lot of time being miserable and scared. Look for ways to be a blessing to someone. Our struggles may be preparing us to be in the path of someone that needs what we have, what we can give. Remember always that we are his hands and feet. Find a way to lend a hand. And keep praying for everyone through all of this. God is listening. You may not realize it, but where we are now, God may be providing us with a vital lesson for our next adventure. As Maya Angelou said, if you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude about it. Learn to bloom where you are planted. Even if you find yourself planted under some concrete at the moment, look for the crack in the concrete to find your way out. And despite all odds, choose to bloom anyway. I am sure we'll get out of this before 70 years. Have a fruitful week.